welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really digging into some core questions about, well, how our societies function and where our individual rights truly begin and end.
Yeah, some foundational stuff.
Exactly. We're going to tackle everything from why we even need laws, right down to the basics, up to that often tricky question of freedom of speech. Where does it hit its limits?
And this all came from a listener question, right?
It did, from Jordan, who was curious about, everything from blasphemy laws to what might be unacceptable behavior at a funeral, for instance.
That's a huge range, but important.
It is. It's a huge, incredibly important area, and, we're ready to try and unravel it a bit.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive, to sort of take you step by step through these tangled threads, legal systems, societal norms, personal freedoms.
How they all weave together.
Precisely. We'll look at why we have laws, the key differences between types of rules, and really try to illuminate the boundaries of free expression. Hopefully, provide some clarity without getting bogged down in jargon.
Okay, let's dive in then. Let's unpack this. At its most basic level, why do we need laws? Why are they so crucial? I mean, couldn't we all just sort of be nice, get along?
Hey, well, that's the ideal, isn't it? But just imagine a city, even for an hour, with no traffic rules.
Chaos. Absolute chaos.
Right. Or if property rights just vanish, that kind of breakdown, scaled up across everything, that's what laws fundamentally prevent. They give us the essential framework: order, stability.
So it's about predictability.
Yes, exactly. A clear, predictable environment. It stops us descending into, a situation where might makes right, where disputes are settled by force, not reason. It's about trust in how things work.
Okay, so it's more than just stopping fights or punishing people who do bad things. What are some of those maybe deeper functions laws serve?
Yeah.
The ones we might not think about every day?
That's a great question, because beyond just preventing chaos, laws do a few really key things. First, like we touched on, establishing order and preventing harm.
Like the traffic laws example.
Spot on. They aren't just suggestions. They stop collisions, save lives. Criminal laws, too, they define what's unacceptable, lay out consequences, and that deters violence, theft. Without those clear lines, everything becomes uncertain.
They're like guardrails for society.
Nicely put, guardrails. But they also, and this is crucial, work to protect rights and freedoms. They safeguard your individual rights, life, liberty, a fair trial, and your property rights. From other people, sure, but also from the government potentially overreaching.
That's a really important counterpoint. We often think of laws as restrictive, but you're saying they're also empowering.
Hugely empowering. They ensure a baseline of security and freedom for you. Another big one is promoting justice and resolving disputes.
Right, like courts.
Exactly. When disagreements happen over a contract, a boundary line, whatever the legal system offers an impartial way to sort it out, that stops people taking things into their own hands, vigilantism. It pushes towards fairness.
Makes sense.
And then there's the economic side. Laws are fundamental for facilitating economic growth. Think contracts, property rights, business rules. This stable legal framework creates predictability.
So businesses can invest, trade.
Precisely. They can operate knowing agreements generally hold up. And maybe most profoundly, laws can be a powerful engine for driving social change.
How so?
Well, think about civil rights legislation. Laws have been used again and again to tackle societal injustices, discrimination based on race, gender, religion. How laws change often reflects how a society's values are evolving. They help build a more inclusive community.
Wow. Yeah, it really shows how these frameworks, often invisible, benefit you directly. Every day. From driving your car, signing a contract, just feeling safe. It's so much more than just don't steal. Correct. Okay, this brings up something fascinating from Jordan's original question. If laws are so vital, are all rules created equal? Because thinking about blasphemy laws versus, a parking ticket, feels like a totally different world.
That's a really sharp observation. And no, they're definitely not created equal. We're really talking about two distinct kinds of systems: societal or secular laws and religious laws. The differences are pretty stark, mainly in 4 areas.
Okay. What's the first one?
First is the source of authority: societal laws. They come from human institutions, governments, legislatures, courts. Their power comes from the consent of the people, essentially, and they change through political processes.
Right, we vote, we debate.
Exactly. Religious laws, though, they're generally believed to be divinely inspired. The authority comes from a higher power, a sacred text. Often seen as eternal, though, of course, how they're interpreted can change over time.
Okay, so one's human-made, evolving. The other's seen as divinely given, more fixed. That's a massive difference right there.
It really is, and that difference shapes the second point: scope and application. Societal laws, they govern the public sphere. They apply to everyone in a particular society, regardless of personal beliefs. Their focus is public order, individual rights within that jurisdiction.
So everyone has to follow traffic laws, no matter their religion.
Correct. Religious laws, however, mainly guide the adherence of a specific faith. They cover moral conduct, rituals, dietary rules, things like that. And in a secular state, following them is usually voluntary. It's a personal or community choice.
Okay, so one applies to everyone in a place, the other applies if you belong to that faith. Got it. What about enforcement?
Big difference there, too. Enforcement. Societal laws are backed by the state. Police, courts, prisons. The penalties are tangible fines, jail time.
Right.
Religious laws. Enforcement is more often through individual conscience or maybe religious authorities within that community. Consequences might be social disapproval, spiritual concerns, maybe expulsion from the religious group, but not usually state-imposed fines or imprisonment.
Unless the act also breaks a secular law, I suppose.
Precisely. And finally, adaptability and change. Societal laws are designed to be dynamic. They can be changed, amended, repealed through public debate, political action, reflecting new values or needs.
Like we see laws changing all the time.
We do. Religious laws, on the other hand, while interpretations can shift, their core principles are generally seen as much more fixed. They aren't typically subject to the same kind of political give and take.
So, zooming out, what does this separation really mean for how we live together? It feels like this is key to modern governance, this split.
It absolutely is.
Because you're saying in many modern secular societies, the state basically stays out of enforcing religious rules, right?
Right.
Unless the action also breaks a societal law, like you won't get arrested for eating the wrong food according to some religious rule.
Exactly right. That's the essence of the secular social contract. We, as a society, agree on rules for the common good, separate from religious doctrine. Now, historically, religious ideas, justice, human dignity, definitely influence secular law. You can see the echoes. But their functions today, in a modern secular state, are distinct. The state's job isn't enforcing religious belief.
Okay, building on that. Jordan's question about blasphemy laws really hits this distinction hard. What are blasphemy laws exactly? And how do they fit or not fit in a secular society?
Right.
Blasphemy laws are laws that specifically prohibit insulting or showing contempt or a lack of reverence for a deity, sacred objects, holy figures, that sort of thing. And this is where the contrast with typical societal laws gets really sharp. It brings us back to that idea, protecting ideas versus protecting people.
Okay, how so?
Well, first, look at the subject matter. Blasphemy laws criminalize giving offense to a religious concept or belief, not causing tangible harm to a person or property. Normal societal laws, they focus on preventing harm to people or society. Things like assault, theft, defamation, where there's measurable secular harm.
Okay, so one protects an idea or a belief from being insulted. The other protects people or their property from actual harm. That feels like a really crucial difference.
It's fundamental, and that shapes their justification. Blasphemy laws often find their roots in religious doctrine. The argument is that the state should protect a specific religion from insult. Normal societal laws, though, are justified by the need for a functioning, safe, fair society based on that secular social contract we talked about. Their authority doesn't derive from a holy book. And I bet they differ a lot in who they apply to, right?
Absolutely. That's the universality versus specificity point. Blasphemy laws are usually tied to one specific religion. A law in country A might protect Christianity, while in country B, it protects Islam. Leads to wildly different rules depending on where you are.
Whereas laws against theft are pretty much universal within a country.
Generally, yes. Normal societal laws against acts like assault or fraud apply universally within that legal system, regardless of anyone's beliefs. And finally, the big one, freedom of speech. Blasphemy laws are a direct restriction on expressing certain opinions. They make it illegal to voice criticism or doubt, even if it doesn't incite violence.
Whereas other speech restrictions.
Other restrictions, like defamation or incitement laws, aim to protect individuals from direct harm. They might limit speech, yes, but the justification is protecting people, not protecting ideas or beliefs from being questioned or criticized.
So it really boils down to, one protects ideas from challenge, the other protects people from harm. That crystallizes it for me.
That's the core distinction, and it's why many international human rights groups and many secular governments view blasphemy laws as problematic, as infringing on fundamental human rights. That's led to their repeal in lots of Western countries. But it's crucial to remember they are still very much enforced elsewhere, sometimes with incredibly severe penalties.
Okay, so let's sharpen this point even more. What does this mean for us day to day? What is the fundamental difference between, say, insulting a person versus insulting a religious figure? This seems to be where so many free speech debates ignite.
It really is the crux of it. Okay, insulting a person. Legally, this usually falls under things like defamation. That means making a false statement that harms someone's reputation.
Right, you can't just make things up to ruin someone's life or career.
Exactly. Or sometimes, depending on the place and context, it might be seen as public insult or verbal assault, especially if it's threatening, abusive, and likely to, cause a fight or public disturbance.
Yeah.
The key focus is always on direct personal harm to an individual's reputation, safety, or well-being.
And if the person is deceased, you mentioned earlier that you generally can't defame the dead, but...
Right. Defamation usually protects the living. But if false statements about the deceased also harm the reputation of living relatives, that could potentially be actionable. The harm has to be to a living person.
Okay. Now compare that to insulting a religious figure.
Historically, that was the territory of blasphemy laws. The harm wasn't seen as being done to a person, but as an offense against the religion itself, even though, of course, believers may feel deeply hurt indirectly. The legal justification was different, protecting the religion, maintaining social order tied to that religion.
Not protecting an individual's reputation in the same way.
Correct. The legal basis for defamation is protecting individuals and keeping public order by preventing reputational damage through lies. The law sees your reputation as valuable. For religious figures under blasphemy law, the justification was often about protecting the religion or the state's religious identity.
Which, as you said, bumps up against freedom of speech much more directly.
It does, because freedom of speech is generally limited when it directly harms other individuals. Think defamation, incitement to violence, true threats, the classic example. You can't falsely shout fire in a crowded theater because it causes panic and harm. Laws try to balance free speech with the right to be safe from harm.
But blasphemy laws go further.
They do, because they make it illegal to express opinions about ideas or beliefs, not just actions that directly harm people. That's where the conflict becomes much sharper in societies that value free expression.
So in places that have gotten rid of blasphemy laws, how do they deal with speech that attacks faith? Because people still worry about hateful language targeting religious groups.
Yeah.
That's where hate speech laws fit in, right?
Yes, exactly. That's the crucial shift you see in many modern legal systems.
Yeah.
With hate speech laws, the focus changes. The offense isn't insulting the religion itself, it's attacking the people who follow that religion.
Protecting the individuals again.
Precisely. Protecting individuals from discrimination, hostility, or violence because of their religion. It's about safeguarding people, similar to laws against racial hatred. So the distinction is powerful, saying, I don't agree with religion Y, or I don't believe in Prophet X, that's generally protected speech. But saying, all followers of religion Y are evil and should be driven out, or people who believe in Prophet X are terrorists and deserve to be attacked, that crosses the line into hate speech in many places, because the focus shifts to inciting hatred or violence against a group of people.
Protecting people versus protecting ideas. That distinction keeps coming back. It seems absolutely central.
Yeah.
Okay, let's pivot to Jordan's other scenario, the one that feels much more personal, maybe more visceral. Can freedom of speech justify violating other boundaries, legal or ethical? Like the funeral scenario. People show up at your mother's funeral and start mocking the family, ridiculing the deceased, all in the name of free expression. Is that protected, or is it just an abuse of the idea?
Yeah, that's a tough scenario emotionally, but legally the answer is pretty clear in most systems. Freedom of speech is not absolute. It never exists in a vacuum. It's always balanced against other fundamental rights and the basic need for a peaceful, functioning society.
So the funeral scenario.
The funeral scenario, people shouting insults, ridiculing the family, would almost certainly not be protected speech. In fact, it could well be considered a crime.
Why specifically? It just feels intuitively wrong, but what are the legal reasons?
Several reasons. First, remember that speech is limited when it causes direct harm to individuals. While, as we said, defaming the dead is tricky legally, malicious false statements could harm the reputation of the living family members.
Okay.
More directly, though, such behavior would likely fall under laws against harassment or intentional infliction of emotional distress, intentionally causing severe emotional suffering to others, especially in such a vulnerable setting. That's often illegal. The purpose there isn't dialogue or expressing an idea, it's cruelty. It's inflicting pain.
And potentially inciting violence too, I imagine.
It could, depending on what's said, speech intended or likely to cause imminent violence or lawlessness is never protected.
So again, it comes back to the malicious intent and the direct harm to living people. This isn't like blasphemy, arguing about an idea. This is a targeted, cruel act against the family at their most vulnerable. It's a different beast entirely.
Completely different. And secondly, there's the concept of time, place, and manner restrictions. Governments can impose reasonable limits on speech to protect public order and the rights of others. A funeral is generally considered a private, solemn event.
Right, not a public square.
Exactly. Laws often exist specifically to prevent protests or disturbances at funerals or near them. These laws aren't usually about what is being said, the content, but about preventing the disruption of a peaceful, private gathering and protecting the mourner's right to grieve without harassment. Some places literally have laws setting a distance buffer zone around funerals for protests.
That makes total sense. It clarifies those boundaries. You have speech rights, but not the right to intentionally harm people or massively disrupt a private, solemn occasion like that.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, you also brought up something fascinating psychologically. Why do some people seem to take pride in defying laws? What's behind that? Because it's not always just about being bad. Sometimes there's a sense of purpose, right?
That's a really complex area, deeply human. The motivation varies hugely, and it involves psychology, social factors, politics. It's vital to distinguish between types of law-breaking here.
Okay.
On one hand, you have what we might call standard criminal societal law-breaking, theft, assault, fraud, etc. If there's pride involved there, it's often, frankly, self-serving. Maybe thrill-seeking, maybe an antisocial outlook, a challenge to authority just for the sake of it, or simply personal gain. It usually lacks a broader moral or social purpose. It's about the individual benefit or impulse.
That feels very different from someone protesting an unjust law, taking pride in that.
Totally different. And that brings us to civil disobedience. Breaking societal laws for a cause. That's where pride often is a central motivator, and a more widely understood one. Think about figures like Martin Luther King Jr., or Susan B. Anthony fighting for suffrage, or Nelson Mandela against apartheid.
Right, historical figures we admire.
Exactly. They deliberately broke laws they saw as profoundly unjust. Their drive wasn't personal gain, it was a deep moral conviction, a fight for what they believed was a higher good. Their actions were public statements, protests aimed at changing society. The pride came from their commitment to justice, their willingness to face the consequences for their beliefs.
Okay, so that's pride in fighting injustice within the societal framework. What about breaking religious laws or blasphemy laws specifically? Where does the pride come from there? Is that civil disobedience too?
It often has elements of civil disobedience, yeah, but also layers of personal conviction. It's a bit of a mix. People might intentionally break these laws and feel pride in doing so for several interconnected reasons. Well, first, it could be a defense of freedom of expression. Many see blasphemy laws as violating basic human rights, freedom of thought, freedom of speech. So, defying them becomes an act against what they perceive as religious oppression or censorship. The pride comes from standing up for a principle they see as universal.
So, pride in upholding a fundamental freedom.
Exactly. Second, it can be about protesting specific religious dogma, challenging beliefs or practices they view as outdated, maybe harmful, irrational, or things that suppress progress, autonomy, or justice. Breaking the rule is a public rejection of that dogma.
Makes sense.
Third, and this can be very powerful, it can be an assertion of personal autonomy, especially for people who've maybe left a very strict religious background. Breaking a specific religious rule can be a deeply symbolic act of liberation. It's about reclaiming their own identity, asserting control over their own moral compass. It's a statement, I decide what I believe.
A personal declaration of independence almost.
In a way, yes. And finally, it can function as a communicative act, much like civil disobedience. Breaking these laws, especially publicly, can be a deliberate strategy to start a conversation, to draw attention to issues around free speech, the role of religious institutions, or the rights and perspectives of non-believers or dissenters.
So in these cases, the pride isn't just about rule breaking itself, it's tied to the belief that they're doing it for a just moral reason, to challenge something unfair, to stand up for a principle, or to assert their own freedom. That adds a lot of nuance.
Wow, we have covered a lot of ground today. What an expansive journey, from why we even have laws, that fundamental need for order, all the way to these intricate distinctions between societal and religious rules, and mapping out those really critical boundaries of free speech, especially where it bumps up against protecting people versus protecting ideas.
It's definitely a lot to chew on.
It is, but I feel like it's much clearer now. Those distinctions are key. Absolutely. We've really tried to delve into how laws aim to protect both that social order and individual rights. And hopefully understanding these nuances helps empower you, our listener, to navigate some really complex social interactions and debates.
Yeah.
Which maybe leaves us with a final thought or perhaps a question for you to ponder. What responsibility do we all share in maintaining that delicate balance between freedom and safety in our own lives and in our wider communities? How do we uphold both?
That's a powerful question to end on. Something for everyone to think about. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.